Everyone, welcome back to Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris back with the aftermath. This is the show we do when the dust has settled from the instant post-match reaction to Newcastle's latest game, which happened to be a 2-2 draw against Chelsea. I jumped on yesterday. I was furious at the referees and the officials for just horrific officiating, it's got to be said. And I'm not going to spend this whole video talking about that, but I still can't get my head around what on earth Andy Madley and Peter Banks and VAR were doing yesterday with that game. It's absolutely disgraceful. Has it cost Newcastle the game? Possibly, yes. But what also cost Newcastle the game was the in-game management, which I'll get stuck right into now. Before I do, a little reminder, if you haven't already, smash subscribe. How it gets to the next milestone, which is 13,000. We are 12,000 for Christmas. Thank you very much for the early present, ladies and gentlemen. But we'd like to be 13,000 very early on in 2026, and you can help get us there by just clicking that simple button and sharing with your family and friends. All free content and evermore. We don't charge for it, but if you want to be a member, there is an option down there below to do that and support the channel as well. So let's get stuck into that game then. What went wrong for that game and what went right for that game? So what we saw in the game was everything that's good and everything that's bad about Eddie Howe's Newcastle United. The first half was the best half of football I've seen that team play since they won the Carabao Cup final. Intensity, in the face, pressure, quick, slick passing, everybody wanting the ball, bravery, courage, everything that was lacking in the Tyne and Weir derby. I mean, if we played a tenth of how we played in that first half last week against Sunderland, we would have been 3-0 up in the first half. It was night and day in terms of performances, and I think it was something that they owed the fans. They really did, and you could see that in the players. I mean, Anthony Gordon, he's not doing much to dispel the myth that he only shows up for the big games, because that was a big game and Anthony Gordon didn't half show up in the first half. And that's the frustrating thing about Anthony Gordon, because you know that's the player that's in there. Even if he gives 40%, 50% of that work rate in games, you can't be too disappointed, because he presses so well, he's so quick, he's so dangerous. You know, he wants the ball, he's yelling, he's screaming for it, he's beating his man. The bravery, the courage is there, the commitment's there, but we didn't see any of that in the Tyne and Weir derby and loads of games this season. So let's hope that's Gordon turning the corner and starting to give us the performances that we all want from this player, because on his day, he's one of our most influential players, there's no doubt about it. But he's just not had enough days over the last year and a half. It's as simple as that. But he was electric in that first half. He played a part in the goals. Love to see Voltemade get back on the score sheet so early on. The whole pre-game analysis on TNT Sports was talking about Voltemade only having 1 and 11, and then he gets 2 in that game. You know, real good goal for the first goal. He follows the play in really well, gets in the box, comes alive, smashes it away. The second one's a beautiful finish after great work rate from Anthony Gordon. And, you know, it looks like there's only one winner in that first half. We should have had a third goal with Nick Voltemade at the back stick, you know, but we couldn't quite make it tell. And then the second half comes on. This is what goes wrong with Newcastle United. Now, there wasn't as much of a kind of malaise and an apathy in the second half that we've seen in lots of games, but there was definitely a step off. And honestly, guys, I put it down to the James Bunce player performance, scientific side of the game, because that's what's changed since Eddie Howe first took a hold of this Newcastle United team, and we were horrible to play against. We were in people's faces. We were pressing with intensity for probably about 65, 70 minutes of a game. You know, we were shit houses, all of that. Since Bunce come in, that's not been there, you know, and I do think that needs to be addressed and needs to be looked at behind the scenes, because, you know, we can't quite lose our identity completely, because that first half is the way Newcastle United play, but you can't sustain it for 90 minutes. So it goes back to in-game management. And, you know, Maresca's at a bit of a funny stage with Chelsea. You know, he's saying some very cryptic things in the lead up to this game, and, you know, links to Man City, you know, because I think Pep could be off. I think if City win the league this season, I think Pep could go. And then City will be looking for a new manager. Would they come in for Eddie Howe? I don't know. We'd have to wait and see. But I think that could be on the cards if City win the league this season. You know, Pep could call it a day. But, you know, Maresca made a massive change that changed this game in the second half completely. He took off Gusto at right back, who was getting tortured by Anthony Gordon. He really was. Should have been red carded, really. I think he had a yellow already. He was already getting rinsed and putting foots out and pulling people and all sorts of stuff. Him and Gordon were having a right ding-dong. I love to see it. You know, it's that kind of football that I grew up watching. I love those kind of battles. But he got hooked off. Reece James went back to right back, and Enzo Fernandez came in the midfield, and he came on about, I think it was the 55th minute mark or something like that, and that changed the game for Chelsea, gave them way more control in midfield. Tonali and Guimaraes were chasing shadows rather than winning the ball and doing something with it. Bruno was taking too many touches. He was getting pressed. He was getting rushed. Caicedo, his physicality. And this is where I call into question Eddie Howe's in-game management. I wasn't blaming him in the post-match, mainly because I was so pissed off with the referees, but I've got to call his in-game management and his ability to smell danger into question here. And this isn't the first time this has happened this season. So Enzo Fernandez gets a hold of this game from probably about, the hour mark. And then they go and get the equaliser. And Howe still doesn't make the changes. He doesn't make the changes for another 10, 12 minutes. Now, the issue I have with this is the minute Enzo Fernandez starts getting control of that game, and you can see Bruno's hanging out of his arse, you can see the midfield's being overrun, you can see Caicedo's getting very physical. I mean, for me, he elbows Tonali in the head at one point. I think that's got to be looked at by VAR, but the way those fuckers were looking, I think they were too busy watching Welcome to Derry or something like that. They weren't watching the fucking game because, they should have spotted at least 2 or 3 fucking penalties or red card incidents in that game. But Joe Linton's sitting on the bench. If he's fit enough to be on the bench, he's fit enough to get involved. I'd have brought Joe Linton on potentially to add some physicality to that midfield because Caicedo was starting to overpower our midfield, and so was Fernandez. Get Joe Linton in there, fucking rattle one of them, wind Fernandez up and have him more concentrating on halfing people than actually getting on the ball and making key passes, which he did. I think Caicedo got 5 interceptions in the game as well, loads of tackles. He took control of that midfield battle in the second half, and that's what got Chelsea back into things. And Reece James was excellent from right back as well. But there was so many changes that Howe could have done, in terms of tactical changes. You could have brought Joe Linton, as I say, to add physicality to that midfield. He could have even potentially, if he was taking Gordon off, if Gordon was blowing, he could have took Gordon off. Could have even, I know as mad as it sounds, you probably scream when I say it, could have even pushed Lewis Miley in as a third centre-half alongside Chow and Cher, and then went kind of 5 at the back with a back 3 and wing backs with Murphy and Hall on the other side. Could have tried that just to get a bit of control in the game, just to stop Chelsea from playing and breaking our lines and getting through, and that could have been an option there as well, but that didn't happen either. So he waits until equaliser goes in, and again, it's all reactive stuff. It's not proactive stuff. It's not smelling danger and changing the game. Maresca did that. He realised they were losing the midfield battle, and Reece James was probably better at right back to stop the threat of Anthony Gordon out wide or Harvey Barnes when he come on. So Maresca made a positive change to get Chelsea back into that game, and you've got to give the manager credit for that. Our manager didn't. Our manager stood in the sidelines and watched again. Now, the subs that he made were positive subs to try and win that game. He felt that we could win that game, but it was very Keegan-esque in many ways. You score 2, we'll score 3. That was Howe's mentality, I think. Yes, there's loads of chances. Barnes has a great chance at the back stick. Or another day that goes in, we win 3-2, and we're all lauding Eddie Howe, for making those substitutions. Anthony Elanga comes on again. He's got speed, but that's all he's got. He's headless. He makes bad decisions at the wrong time, the right time where you should be making the right pass. He fluffs his lines and he gets a rush of blood to the head. That chance where he shoots, it's a difficult angle for him. It takes a hell of a finish to beat the keeper of Sanchez's quality to that corner. Harvey Barnes is there for a tap, and Wissa's there possibly as well to have a strike on goal. They're both better finishers than you, son. Your confidence is low. Don't shoot, pass that ball, get an assist, get the fans back on your side. Bad decision again. It was Anthony Gordon against Aston Villa all over again for Anthony Elanga in that instance, and that's what worries me about Elanga. He doesn't seem to be learning from his mistakes. That mistake was right at the start of the season, and many people think that caused the spiral that has caused his iffy form, but he's not learnt his lesson. I'm running through on goal like that. I'm a little bit worried about the fans groaning and moaning when I get the ball, and I see Harvey Barnes pegging it on my right hand side, knowing how good of a finisher he is. I'm slipping him in, and it's a goal. I just don't understand what goes through Elanga's mind there. It's ridiculous. His positional sense is poor. He rushes every pass. He takes that chance there and he fluffs it. I don't know what's going on with this kid. I really, really don't. I'm not sure he's going to come good, to be honest with you. I really don't. I think if this kid hasn't come good by the new year, I think Newcastle have got to admit they made a bad mistake here, and they need to look and get rid of him in the summer. But we had the chances to win the game, but Chelsea were in control of it from Fernandez coming on. That's what bugs me about how he doesn't make the right changes. There's 2 or 3 tactical changes he can make there, tweaks he can make there to try and just stem the pressure a little bit, and then maybe bring on the Barnes and Wissa subs. The Joe Linton one for the physicality was probably the glaring one, or pushing Lewis Miley back in the back 3 and going back 5 just to try and stem a bit of pressure from Chelsea at that time, stay in the game, and then try and win it with Wissa and Barnes later on. But he didn't do that either, and they're the kind of questions I would love somebody to ask him, but they're not going to ask him that. But then you get people in the comments, there'll be people in this video, oh, do you know better than Eddie Howe? Do you fucking... I'm allowed to have an opinion, and I'm voicing my opinion as a fan and a content creator. That's what we do. That's what I do. That's what all fans do in the ground, in the boozer, on the way to the game and the way back from the game, and whether they do content or not. We all voice an opinion. We're all entitled to an opinion. Yours doesn't have to marry with mine. That's fine. We can agree to disagree. But I think Eddie Howe was slow to make changes in that game, and that's what potentially allowed Chelsea back into the game. But I will praise him for the positive changes. Those 3 players should have really made a better impact. Now, the Elanga thing, I don't want to dwell on too much, but I think Elanga's shown there that he can't be trusted to influence games. I'm sorry, but he can't be trusted to start games, and he can't be trusted to influence games. Harvey Barnes, probably on the right-hand side, would have been a better sub to bring on then and leave Gordon on for a little bit longer, potentially. And then, if you took Gordon off, maybe even, I don't know, put Wiss and Voltemada up front together or something like that, because Elanga cannot be trusted in games. He's too headless and he makes too many simple mistakes. And I don't know how many more chances this kid's going to get. I really, really don't, before, the club and Eddie Howe admit that they've wasted 55 million quid on a kid who's just not good enough, to be brutally honest with you. But it was frustrating. But the positives were that Newcastle had such a good performance in the first half. If they play like that against Manchester United on Boxing Day, they could very well win that game, but our away form is so fucking bad. And Man United leaked goals, but Man United could score goals as well. Yes, they're missing Mbeumo, which is massive for them. They're missing Adama Diallo. They're missing him. He's key for them as well. So they're missing some key players in that squad. So we could catch Manchester United at a really good time here. And if we play like that in the first half, I think we could really get a good result there. So I'll do the preview in the next few days for that. But frustration, I think, because Newcastle have to learn how to manage games better. Intensity is our identity. There's no doubt. If you're going to be intense for 55 minutes, 60 minutes, right? Manage the game for another 10 minutes, 15 minutes, then maybe go again for another 10-minute spell with refreshing subs and fresh legs. We need to learn how to manage these games better. We're a big team. We've got lots of football now. We're a Champions League team. We want to get there in the top 5 of the league, which I think looks massively distant at the minute, to be honest with you. I'll get into more of that, I think, in videos to come. But I think Newcastle have left way too many points on the table, and I think the top 5 is looking like a complete pipe dream at the minute. If we're lucky, we'll get top 7. Maybe we could win a cup still, but I think getting past Man City is very, very hard in the Carabao Cup. All that's to come, most doubt, for no doubt at all, for the games that come in thick and fast over the festive period. But frustrating, positive signs, but also negative signs that Newcastle struggle to manage games, and the manager needs to smell danger quicker, is how I'm going to leave this one, guys. Thanks for watching. Remember, like and subscribe. Keep it evermore. Have a belter. I'll be back with a Man United preview, wishing you all a Merry Christmas. I've just been to the gym today, just before I eat my body weight in chocolate, so I thought I'd try and stem the damage before it happens. I'm trying to be proactive anyhow, rather than reactive. There's a lesson for you. But thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe. Have a belter. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
Heroes celebrate. They have done it.